This is how Black Ops 2 introduces itself. There's no target range, there's no comrade AI to follow around, no on-screen messages explaining things. Just some waypoints, half of which are optional, enemies and allies clashing in all directions, both equally at your whim, and a couple of airstrikes. If this is a tutorial, it's an unusual one. Even the most subtle tutorials make sure to introduce concepts one by one, and to inform you on the controls. This opening sequence does none of that. You're given full reign right off the bat. But all of the random chaos serves as a learning experience. It provides a free environment so you can experiment on your own. If only it lasted longer before lapsing into a drunken jungle tour. Still, the presence of this openness in Black Ops 2 is worth considering. Was it included on the mostly valid assumption that everyone already knows how to play Call of Duty? Or is it some type of riff on previous Call of Duty games? A re-examination of the cliches which may have bogged the series down. Later in the game, there is a traditional by the numbers tutorial, which would indicate that the game's introduction is simply a fluke. It would, that is, if it weren't for the subject matter of that tutorial, an entirely new single-player game type, the Strike Force missions. Black Ops 2 is a response to the criticisms which have been leveled at its series in the past. The Strike Force missions bring permadeath, open maps, and perspective-swapping RTS elements to a formula which had frequently been criticized for simplicity and meaninglessness. More than that, though, are a number of developments which can be seen throughout the normal campaign of Black Ops 2. Infinite enemy respawn has been removed again. Most missions feature at least one open-ended area with multiple paths to allow for aggression as well as caution. Missions themselves are all padded to over 30 minutes in length, a far cry from the usual 10-minute burst, though a significant portion of the padding comes in the form of cutscenes. There's even a branching narrative this time around, with life or death decisions being placed in your hands in the form of quick timer events. Many of these improvements and additions come with caveats. The Strike Force missions in particular fall flat on their face. Due to the simplicity of the AI and some absurdly restrictive controls, very little can be done aside from move from point A to point B, and the best bet is still to stay on foot and gun down the bad guys same as in the normal missions. Ideally, they would allow for slow, planned building raids of the sort that you might see on Ghost in the Shell, or at least a sense of resource management. Neither happens. But is the game worse overall? The added layers of interaction create a different sense of confusion and disorientation, which could be harnessed in the next Call of Duty. Right now, they serve largely as an enigma, which regardless of success, changes the tone of the game considerably. One moment you're an immortal demigod, and the next you're an omniscient failure. On a conceptual level, the Strike Force missions are fascinating. Through the technology of live wireless camera feeds, some sort of controlling entity is able to effectively possess humans and machines alike, and will them to do its bidding. This moves with a strong undercurrent of paranoia in Black Ops 2, from wristwatches that can identify strangers from afar, to mechanical spiders which crawl through vent shafts to steal identities. The gimmicks of the game are far more effective at conveying a sense of the sinister than the combat or the dialogue, in spite of the brash depravity which the latter two frequently throw across the screen. Other changes to the formula stand well on their own. The removal of infinite respawns creates a much more reasonable atmosphere, making it so that the player will die if they decide to rush forward too quickly, and not if they decide to be cautious. But with that toxic element eliminated, the peculiar mechanic of regenerating health moves to the forefront. Regenerating health has been shown to function in games where death is immediate, not gradual. But does Black Ops 2 fit within that category? On normal difficulty, the range between dead and healthy is so wide that it's possible to go through entire firefights with a red blurry filter perpetually fading in and out on screen. This allows for stunts which wouldn't be possible with a lower threshold, but it also means that there is effectively no warning indicator when you do die. When the red jelly of death is a constant, it loses all meaning, and so do its consequences. On veteran difficulty, this isn't the case, and caution and planning do become vital. In some missions, such as the final assault at Haiti, playing on veteran makes decisions more important, and gives the sense, rather than merely the appearance, of the enemies having the upper hand. However, not all of Black Ops 2 is designed like the assault at Haiti. The horseback riding section in particular leans heavily on your ability to dash past enemy fire in order to fulfill objectives. When death is made immediate in this section, progress once again becomes counterintuitive. There's nothing bombastic or heroic about crawling around in the dirt to pick off insignificant foot soldiers while your comrades leave you in the dust. bombastic or heroic. Still, level design is a real element here. That same horseback area almost feels like the White Forest showdown at the end of Half-Life 2 Episode 2. It's one of the many maps and areas which have a distinct width and openness. Of course, it overextends itself, leading to foolish sudden death zones and overbearing guidance. Generally, the larger an area gets in Black Ops 2, the likelier it is to split at the seams. But a sudden death at the hands of a random barrier, distinct from death at the hands of the enemy, is still preferred to death from a barrier disguised as death from an enemy. And when Treyarch downsizes a bit towards linearity, neither issue remains. In the presence of physical boundaries, options become clear, choice transforms into strategy, and the game finally affords the satisfaction of determining how to proceed. There are even some novel concepts. One is the way that Black Ops 2 uses camouflage. While enemies often still wear easily decipherable suits, such as this ridiculous red camo, others actually wear outfits that help them blend into their environment, often to great effect. It almost seems like a mistake at times when the game is acting like a shooting gallery, but you can't see the targets. Add to that the death penalty for being unable to see them, and you have potential for a major annoyance. For instance, take this minor shootout. There's gunshots, but their source is indiscernible. In order to advance, a few probing deaths may be necessary, but the most important action is running to find a new angle. Already this poses a challenge which is unheard of for the most part of this game, the challenge of determining your relation to the enemy. What's even more interesting is that immediately after the shootout, you get the ability to see your enemies in a glowing red outline. Subsequent enemies would be just as indistinct if it weren't for this ability, but with it, fighting is back to normal. This entire situation is some sort of mini-parable, a tiny lesson detailing the one-upsmanship of technology. And while this is the clearest example, it translates into most other encounters with well-hidden enemies in Black Ops 2, starting with the second mission. In the second mission, not only is the scenery dark and muddled, but many of the enemies are wearing an optical camo, which actually makes them invisible. Conveniently, the gun you're given from the start is able to target them for you, but only if you peer through its sights. Unlike the other situation, this one enhances the layers of the gameplay. The usual decision between being able to move quickly and being able to aim precisely also becomes the decision between being able to easily target enemies up close and being able to see them from afar. The surprise of running into an empty area only to find yourself face to face with a target is welcome, and the concept of being surrounded by invisible shooters fits nicely with the other futuristic paranoid fantasies that this game indulges. In line with the futuristic themes, of course, Black Ops 2 had to have robot enemies. The two robots you'll find yourself fighting during the campaign are both equally uninspired and uninteractive. There are flying quad rotors, which circumvent one of the most important enemy AI rules of taking cover and become featureless, actionless nuisances. And there are walking tanks, which are just as impractical in the game as their legs make them look. At best, the tanks will plant themselves somewhere and become the center of a series of cover objects. The tanks give no good indication as to their vulnerability, but explosives eventually take them down.
Everyone on me! Push into the building! You heard the man! Come on!
Black Ops 2 is a mishmash of cutscenes, neat gadgets, and the occasional good shooting spree. It isn't consistent in the slightest. Freedom is restricted at random, and half the goals are skippable. As in past games, characters shout instructions which prove impractical.
Bring some animal traps! They're still coming! Keep firing, Hudson!
And death lurks in every open field if you happen to stray too far off the beaten path. Veteran mode is finally an enhancement and not a crippled mess, but only in the levels which have a basic emphasis on shooting and mobility. Normal mode is playable all the way through, but is often reduced to a meaningless blur. The core mechanics of Call of Duty have never been at fault. The controls, the sense of weight and momentum, and the decision making between being able to sprint, being able to shoot, and being able to aim are all perfectly acceptable and stand well on their own. Black Ops 2 finally gives these differences a time to shine, and there's a sense of playing a fast-paced game, rather than a slow plotting game with fast-paced visuals. That time is just short-lived before the clouds roll back in.
They got RPGs targeting another G20 convoy. Get ahead, lower level.
What's the call, section? We need those vehicles to
My next video is going to talk about the story of Black Ops 2. Oh boy. And you can also check out my gameplay, my playthrough of Black Ops 2 if you're into that kind of shit.